Welcome along or welcome back to the Dads in Business video podcast series, where we aim to help busy working dads bring the best of themselves to work and to home. My name is Rob Taylor from Dads in Business, and today I'm delighted that we have with us a sleep specialist. Nick Stewart is joining us all the way from the States. He's going to introduce himself and tell us all about himself very shortly, but just to frame the conversation today, we're going to talk heavily about sleep fitness, which might be a new concept for some. The phrase was new to me, which is why I'm fascinated to talk about it. And if you listen right through to the end of today's conversation, Nick's got 3 unusual sleep tactics that are going to help apply to all us watching, listening, and probably myself as well. Because if I asked you how you slept last night, this week, or this month, what would you say? Is it erratic? Is it uncomfortable? Is it disturbed? Is it enough? Is it too much? What is it? I see gurus everywhere where the business leaders seem to perceive that sleep's a weakness. Oh, if you need 5 hours sleep, you're weak. If you're not up at 5 a.m., you're weak. If you're doing this, you're weak. It always goes back to a weakness. So I'm really intrigued to speak to a sleep specialist, a coach around the concept of sleep fitness. So I can't wait to see where this goes. I know the
And
guest today has
Rob, not to interrupt you, but actually there was a study that came out that I'll share a little bit about, and one of the side effects of the study finally answered the question with pretty much significant clarity. What's the minimum and what's the maximum? So I'll be happy to share that with you if you want to bring that back up.
really absolutely. I do. I think it's going to answer
Because
it.
there's the real legit answer now.
We'll hold on to that until we get there.
Yeah.
Let's keep them listening. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, let's dive into it. Nick, you've got a lot of beliefs around the importance of sleep, the risks if we don't get enough. But before we dive into that, let's dive into you and your backstory. Introduce yourself. Tell us your story, how you got here, and who do you aim to help with the concept of sleep fitness?
Yeah, sure. Um, I start this. Obviously, people ask me this question, so it's like it's not that I have a rehearsed answer, but there is a way I start it, which is that mistakes happen. And in 2018, it was a hot August here in the States. Oof, it was brutal. I got some unsound, inaccurate, unhelpful, maybe negligent medical advice and counsel, and that led me to stay awake for 17 nights consecutively, and it destroyed my life. Every area of my life. I mean, financially, my physical, my immune system was shot. I remember getting sick for 3 months. I couldn't fight the common cold. It was crazy. I almost lost my house. Knock on wood, I'm still here, which is great. But yeah, I mean, it always starts there because that's where it really began for me personally. Is a lot of sleep writers and researchers and whatnot and I appreciate the work they do. I steal from it all the time. I combine it with other things to help my own clients, but a lot of them have no clue what it's like to be in the kitchen of hell at such a level that you're, I was hospitalized obviously several times, and I remember this nurse like kind of coming up to me and being like, "So like what?" Like she's like whispering. I'm like, "This is what you do for a living. Why are you whispering to me?" And she was like, "What does that feel like when you've gone that long?" I didn't realize, and Rob, you probably don't know, and no one watching probably knows, that there was a record that the Guinness World Record did record in the early 60s or something. I might have screwed that up. It was a kid at a science fair. He stayed up for like 10 and a half days or something, just as that was the science experiment. Um, I didn't realize that I actually blew him right out of the water and stayed awake for 17. So unofficially, I hold the record for not having died, because there's been plenty of people who have died going that long. I even saw an interview with a guy who was in the Taliban, and they were keeping him up. I can't remember if it was like 6 or 7 nights. And after like 6 or 7 nights, he was out of there. He was like, he was like, I didn't want to be in the Taliban. Like, that was the worst feeling I ever had. So you can only imagine, for me, you double down that. Well, it turns out one day I was working on a separate book than the one that's coming out here in the next month or two. And was like, I should look up and see like what the record actually is. Is there like a pop culture record out there, And I found the 2 answers. And I then learned that the Guinness organization, they stopped keeping track of it decades ago because it was so dangerous. They didn't want to actually entice people to like try to break that record. So I will never be the official record holder. But if Guinness was still around, I certainly would be. And back to the nurse, I tell her and I tell everyone else, it's like you're falling in an elevator shaft with no floor. There's just you're free falling to levels of psychological and physical disconnection that like I said, the best I can do is say, just imagine being in an elevator with no floor and you just never stops falling. It just feels perpetual. I mean, I developed some of the things that they do report about, like irrational fear. Like I was terrified to leave the house. I was terrified of the cell phone. Like there's all this irrational stuff. Strangely enough, I didn't hallucinate. And I know some people who've actually gone, 4 or 5 days without sleep and they hallucinate and stuff. So in a way, I feel extremely lucky in a sense, because I've touched down in a place that for every client that I've had, I think one of the things, and we have to talk about men and sleep because it's an issue I didn't raise with you before, but it's a huge issue. Specifically that once there's some embarrassment around feeling like your issue with sleep is like uniquely your own. And a lot of us when we have a really hard time sleeping, a lot of us go to that place of like, something's wrong. You're staring at the clock and it's 2:30 in the morning and you're like, what the hell? And then you look at the clock again and now it's like 4:30 and you're like, oh my God, I got to get up in an hour and take a shower. Something is really wrong with me. So when you come to a person and you don't say there's something wrong with me, but that's what you're saying. It's a hard thing to do. So in a way, do I ever want to stay awake for 17 nights again? No, I don't know that I'll survive it, but it gives me a angle on what sleep suffering is like, to a degree that it's much easier, I find, with my clients to go, oh, okay, well, this is what I have going on. And then they're much more free to say what's going on. And then I think in 2 other segments, I think there's like getting a little more stable after that period of time. And then I spent what I would call sleep deprivation, which is having less than the amount of hours we'll talk about is needed, 3 or 4 times a week for about 2 years. And I would see different professionals and they would say, oh no, I have other clients who don't sleep too. But they never then said, have you checked out this? Or have you tried this? And it was daunting after 2 years. I realized like, none of these professionals have taught me anything about sleep. Like we've talked about psychology and we've talked about anxiety because after I don't know how many days, you're basically on anxiety permanently. But no one had ever taught me. And so I have some past experience in research at the master's level and the PhD level. And so kind of like my intuition just kind of kicked in and was like, why don't we take sort of this fever pitch, diehard research path that you have and apply it to digging out all of Google Scholars published articles on sleep related to any freaking thing possible. And I spent about 4 years doing that and started compiling it together and then obviously testing it all on myself. And so eventually I got my little plaque up here. I'm just relieved that the expiration date is not until March 2025. So I am a certified sleep science coach uh, from an organization in the United States. There's not many of us. Um, but yeah, so I'd say one, you have the personal experience of having gone 17 nights without sleep. Two, you have 2 years where no one ever really teaches you anything. And then 4 years of just individual study and trial and error and trial and
Mm.
error and testing this and that, the whole 9 yards. And then moving to getting certified as a sleep science coach. But the key thing for me, which is different than a lot of specialists that do exist, is that I'm not and this is what I love about, because some people ask me, like, why did you choose coaching to be the angle? And I said, because the thing I love about coach, I was a full-time coach for 4 years, working with young adults from violent neighborhoods, getting Fortune 500 internships. And I said, no, because the thing I love about coaching is some of the pillars of coaching are like, it's like you take a toolbox and you open it and you're like, does this tool work? And it's like, no. And it's like, chuck it out. Does this one work? No. Chuck it out. Does this one work? Yes. What happens if we take this one and combine them? Wow, it really puts a lot of leverage on the wood and it cracks it open and it works. A lot of people in the sleep world who are at like the doctor level and whatnot, they're bound by that academic institution to only use a particular method. It will usually be called CBTI. And so for me, the coaching part, I mean, there's academics that they don't know me yet, but they are not going to like me because they don't feel that we're regulated enough.
Mm.
And it's that exact thing that I'm like, no. It's the fact that I'm not regulated that much that I can go out and I can take something from CBTI and combine it with 3 other things that I've learned from research into a plan that's for Rob that makes sense based on what's going on for Rob. And
And
so I
with
feel very
CBTI,
free.
Nick, are you talking about cognitive behavioral therapy there? Yeah.
Yeah, they call it cognitive behavioral therapy insomnia. It's a little unpleasant.
Mm.
it's
And
it's sort
is
of,
that what you had, or is that what they tried to treat you with?
no, that's the thing that kind of blew my mind. Like, once after 2 years, like I saw this one counselor who was like trained in CBT,
Mm.
cognitive behavioral therapy, but he never like once took the next step and said like, oh yeah, like some guys published a book, like it's literally says CBTI on it, and it's the method. It's out there. Like, I don't know why he didn't think like maybe he could hand it to me and
Yeah.
then I would use it. So there's like some major disconnect between people who are supporting people with sleep issues and the people who actually are having them.
So what, Nick, in your experience, and thanks for such a good insight for your introduction. I mean, I can't imagine what 17 nights no sleep does to a person or makes you think. That must be what an experience to have gone through, and how good it is that you're sharing that lived experience now to help others. I think it's a great application. It sounds like it's become your true life's work, which is obviously a good thing to come out of this. So, well done to you for that. Not that you need my praise, but well done for that. I think it's excellent. And
Thanks, Rob.
what are you seeing beyond your own causes, for how it happened to you? But what's happening to men and dads in this space? Why is it a problem? How does it creep up on us? What are some warning signs that we might have issues
Well,
somewhere?
just so your audience knows, Rob and I had zero pre-discussion about men and sleep, and it didn't hit me at first, but it's actually, there is a sub issue in the sleep world, and it actually is about men and sleep. And I had no idea I was going to run into it as I started to take on some like free sessions here and there when I was starting to get off my feet. And it had been years since I had coached and whatnot. And I had coached 18 to 24-year-olds, Rob. So they were so that's kind of like where it accidentally started happening. I'd have a
Mm,
small group with a kid who's supposed to go to Google, and he would look like a ghost. And so the floor manager would be like, "Hey, Nick, your advisee, I don't know if they can go to Google. They just look terrible." And so I would clear the room and sit down with them, and I would find like, "Oh, you guys are living so stretched out that your sleep is totally destroyed." In this one case, this kid's parents found him knocked out on the kitchen floor. Like, you could tell he fell hard. So
Mm.
he literally had gone to that far of exhaustion. His body just went boom. And so I started sleep coaching by accident. Like I didn't even know to call it that at the time. So when I started to get my feet wet back into the coaching sphere, I just thought it would be sort of like that, only to really find that situation after situation, interaction after interaction, the guys don't want to talk about their sleep. I had different salespeople on the Zoom with me selling me this, that, the other thing, different vendors. And if a woman was on and she had any kind of sleep issue, we're not on the call less than 10 seconds and she's telling me the whole thing. I had a meeting with a company and an hour went by, Rob, and I had to tell them, like, "You guys never made the pitch. You just talked about sleep with me for an hour." But you never, like, we have to set up a different meeting for the actual thing. And so I started noticing this and I'm like, huh. And then I run an Airbnb for sleep tourism. And like one of my first guests, as soon as one of these young women knew that I knew something about sleep, "Oh, I used to take Ambien." And boy, did she had a hilarious story. One day I'm going to composite a book of stories of people who have taken Ambien. Do you guys get prescribed Ambien?
No, I was going to ask, what is it? Is it one of the crazy drugs that are advertised on the US television? Is this what
um, I mean, this is just like me outing the United States, but the medical community in the United States, if Rob came to his doctor and was like, "Hey, this is how much sleep I'm getting, or I haven't slept for 3 nights," and they're going to give you antidepressants and they're going to give you probably some Ambien, and that's standard treatment.
Hmm.
And I hope in this conversation we get back to that minimum maximum hour question, because it also triggers a really key piece with that.
Hmm.
Um, so anyways, back to the point about men.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I know, Ambien. So Ambien is what they call a hypnotic, and actually that's a pretty good description of it. And what people find is you get around 3.5 hours of sleep, but you do a whole lot of other things that you are not aware of. So this young lady who came with this group for the Airbnb at my place is like super suited out for sleep. Like every room's got something that has to do with sleep. She goes, "Yeah, one day I heard the doorbell ring. I went to the door and there was this enormous box from Bath and Body Works, which is like her favorite feminine care place. And she opened the box to find her favorite facial wash, except for there was 200 bottles, Rob." And she's like, what is going on?" And so to her credit, she went back, figured out what credit card it was purchased on, looked up what date it was, found out what time it was, the timestamp, and she was like, "I would have been in bed sleeping for hours." So that means that she woke up,
Hmm.
went to a computer, turned it on, put in a password, went to a website, put in an order for the facial cleanser she does love. She just happened to order 200 bottles of it. And you
And she
hear
had
stories
zero
like
recollection. Zero recollection.
zero, Rob, zero. When I finally started, I got prescribed Ambien 3 different times, and it was my partner at the time who just very casually just said something like, "Oh, well, that's like Ambien, Nick." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, you take your Ambien, you get in bed, and then we chit chat for an hour, and then you get up and kind of tidy things up and like kind of organize the house and stuff." I'm like, "For how long am I doing this?" She was like, "A couple hours." Zero recollection. I have none.
Wow. Wow.
It's totally
So,
gone.
so let's connect this to the men's side of things. It's the fascinating piece that
Oh no,
you
it's
discovered.
important. Yeah, so I realized after several months that it was only women. In fact, when I thought about it further, I have a concise version of the book that's coming out that I offered for free, but I asked a friend of mine to beta test it. Well, time went on and, interactions about this and that and the other thing. And then he mentions to me, I mean, this is a guy who's known me for like 15, 20 years. And he says something like, oh yeah, I got to finish chapter such and such. Plus, God knows I need it because of my issues with Caroline and my sleep. And I said, Harold, what are you talking about? What issues? And so his issue, and this is common, is he's an overheater. He heats up a lot. And then that wakes her up and she can't stand it. But he knew that in 2018, I met the floor of hell. And he never, and then I went on this journey to take it to as far as I'm taking it. And he never once stopped Rob to be like, hey, Nick, can I ask you a question? Never. Not once. He's
Mm.
beta testing a course on it. And he's not like, hey, can I ask you a question? And then my like best friend of two did a similar thing where he's known me, he talked to me through some of that experience and never told me that he started losing sleep in college, tried a few things, and then basically settled. And I would say that a lot of men get to that point where they're like, something's not right with my sleep. Let me look up something online. Let me try some different mattress or some pillowcases or something. It doesn't work. It doesn't take. And then they just go, okay, I guess
It's just
that's
who
it.
I am, right? Yeah.
That's what I'm going to be settling with. In
Yeah.
fact, in the United States, women are, it's like 40 to 43% more likely to go seek an alternative support system for sleep than men are.
Yeah,
And
because
so after,
you're right. It's not something I would publicly share. I'd just say, oh, I'm just tired lately, or oh, it's just something else. And I'd often probably think, having listened to what you're saying,
yeah,
that lack of sleep is more an outcome of something that's happened before, and not necessarily cause of what's going on. so,
that's
so I
very astute. That's very astute of you.
and I guess you're suggesting that it's sleep itself that causes the problems, not sleep as the outcome from the problems.
It's totally integrated. You can't
Yeah,
fuse them out with each other.
yeah.
I started to notice, and I've started to build up like an international set of colleagues. One is a sleep tech who does the overnight hospital stays for sleep apnea. Do you guys have those?
No,
It's,
I've obviously, I'm aware of what
you see
sleep
the
apnea is, but yeah,
with the
just,
mask.
yeah, sleep apnea is for those that stop breathing, isn't it, in their sleep?
Yeah, yeah. So if you've got like a really loud snore or something,
Mm,
they're either fat or whatever around their neck area. When they breathe, to your point, they don't breathe all the time.
mm.
And so yeah. How do we get on sleep apnea? Why are we talking about sleep apnea?
It was your network of people. You got an
Oh yeah,
extra.
so I know this guy who I like literally consider a friend now.
Mm.
And so I asked him after like 2 or 3 months of this, where I was like, no guys have said anything. And yet I get on all these calls and women are just like blurting out like, oh, I've been an insomniac for the last 20 years. I'm like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Let's talk about that. And so I asked him, I said, hey, Fraser, might be kind of a weird question, but have you ever noticed a gender bias in the female to male ratio of people who come for the overnight sleep apnea tests? And I said, or am I just being dumb because guys are more likely to be overweight, which would then mean to me they're probably more likely than women to have sleep apnea. Well, I was shocked when he wrote back. He was like, Nick, it was like 5 or 6 years ago, I started to notice it. He's like, I can tell you more than 5 times where they can take 6 patients a night at his place, which is actually a lot. And he said, "Oh yeah, all female, like tons of times. We're only
So what's
females."
driving that, Nick? In your opinion, your
Part
experience, what's driving that?
part part of it, I have no idea. I have my guesses, and my guesses are that the men don't cry, the machismo, the we don't talk about our feelings or whatever, that's still alive and good, that
Hmm.
there was never, I think I should be very upfront that like I studied feminism in college and probably consider myself a feminist male, if you can be, but men never really got a movement or a set of superstars that could be both emotional and rational. So like a lot of those women who would talk to me wouldn't start talking to me about sleep, about the emotional part. They were very much more clinical. But I don't think with the 70s feminist movement in the States, they would feel like I can be that way. They have to be
Hmm.
emotional all the time. So part of my early theory is that we never got off the hook. So guys are just sort of you're supposed to sleep. If you're a real man, you should be sleeping. So I don't know if it's a threat about manhood, and there's still that discomfort about the fact. And I forgot the first male, well, there's two, but the first that ever just started talking to me about it, he was like in his 60s. He was like much older. Or if I'm working with people on LinkedIn, I remember this kid was 19 years old. He was the first male in 2 months who, like, at the end of the call was like, "Hey Nick, can I ask you a question?"
Hmm.
So it seems like the youth males don't have as much of an issue of it, but late 20s and then rolling for a few decades, they don't want to talk about it. And actually, I give this credit to this guy who did talk to me about it. He's like, it's emotional. It actually is an emotional thing. Like when you just think about the basics of like thought and then the emotion that comes with it, it's just like where I started with you before, Rob, where it's like it's 2 a.m. and you're not sleeping and you've been in bed for 4 hours. What is like the thing that gets said in your mind? It's usually, what's wrong? Is there something
Hmm.
wrong? Which that pivots towards, ooh, I'm in trouble. And then it's like, it's 4:30. Holy smokes, there must be something wrong with me. And I think it touches right up against that it's too hot of a ticket. And the last example I'll give you is that I had sort of figured out that this was an issue. And one of the guys on a sales call with me, I can't remember, I want to say he's in South America. He admitted that at night he could fall asleep, but he woke up after a few hours because he was anxious. And so I said to him, I said, well, I'll trade you a single session with me about sleep if you write me a testimonial, if I help you. Okay, yeah, sure. I'd say he's in maybe his early 30s. I said, just don't be like every other guy who can't talk about this. So I like put it in his head to be like,
Mm-hmm.
don't be the
Yeah.
rest of them.
The permission piece, right? Yeah.
Yes. And it still took me over 2 weeks of dogging him to get him on the line. I had to like be up at some ridiculous hour to do the call. And then I kind of forgot because it's been so long now for me how that it's suffering.
Mm.
Once I got him to trust me enough to tell me what was going on, what came back to me was just like, oh man, this guy sounds like a hollow ghost, you know? And then kind of in the way his voice sounded, and then at times when he wouldn't speak, I was like, oh man, this guy has like really been suffering, you
Mm. And
know?
there's a lot
It's
of
like,
male stigma around that. Men shouldn't do this. Men shouldn't share. Men shouldn't speak. Men should just bottle it up. Men should just get on with it. Men should man up. And it sounds to that example, that's
yeah,
exactly what you've heard. He's
Yeah.
been bottling everything up and keeping a lid on everything.
Yeah. So I
And
think you have multiple generations. And so I don't know why it took me to like yesterday to be like, oh my God, Rob's show is literally for this segment of the population that has the biggest trouble with it,
Mm.
because you have to cross that line.
Well, I'm glad we helped you get there. So I'm glad we contributed to a bit of realization for you moving forward. So
I mean, well, like I said, like role models, it's like I feel like I lucked out. Like my dad did cry in front of me, so I knew like, oh, it's good to express the emotional piece. So like that was never scary for me. And I tell clients, I'm like, usually I'm like, I'll tell you two things about me, and then I want to hear from you. Um, that experience so humbled me and shook me in a way that I think my clients realize it, and so they're more likely to be like, well, geez, I didn't have that happen. That guy's really messed up. But I tell them this, and I would tell them to every guy that tunes into this recording, is that one of the upsides of it is that I have no fear. So whatever is plaguing you, Rob, with your sleep issues, I don't fear them at all, because I've been to a place probably a lot crazier and returned somehow, and we can do something about it. And I think you couple that with the fact, and this is, comes out in the forward of the book that's coming out by this guy who's a sleep neurotechnologist in Canada, is that like, he's like, yes, we consult with Nick. He's one of the lead sleep specialists that we consult with, but he's not like the rest of them. And a large part of that is because of what I shared with you earlier, is that I took 4 years to have the freedom to mix and match every single thing,
Yeah.
and came up with strategies and figured out ways, oh, I should have brought it with me. There's a great quote about how motivation gets you started, but it's your habits that keep you
Yeah.
going. I had to spend a lot of time reading endless books about how you break or make habits. And so over time, I tracked myself and then visually tracked it on a calendar for certain things I was tracking, and then realized it was still missing a piece. And then that took some time. And then once I had that, I called it the habit lock, where, basically it's like a 99% foolproof way to make a change happen in your life.
Mm.
So I had to learn all about that. I don't know if you went to literally a doctor of sleep medicine, which there are very few of them in the United States, but they are there. I don't think they're going to talk to you about like how to psychologically make habits form
Yeah.
and
Decide to
go
want to
away,
change, right? Yeah.
right? They're going to either do what we talked about earlier, the CBTI,
Mm-hmm.
because that university is endorsed by such and such, organization, and so that's the only thing they can do.
Or they'll drug
Uh,
you up and send you out the door, I guess.
yeah, or they're violently the other way, which I'm not, which is, and there are several books where this is very like clear on the cover. It's like, without medication, here's the sleep solution without medication. And I was just talking to a woman the other day, and she was, saying like, sometimes she'll go 3 nights and she'll steal a Xanax from her husband to go to sleep because her doctor won't prescribe her a Xanax.
Mm.
And she kind of looked at me like, am I a bad girl for doing this? And I was like, no, if you haven't slept for 3 nights in a row,
You
get a
do whatever
freaking
you can.
horse tranquilizer and and jab it into your thigh and pump it and sleep for as many days as you need. There's a time and a place where medication can keep you afloat. So I'm not totally against medication, but I'm also not totally for it, based on that study that I shared with you about the how many minimum maximum hours there are.
Yeah,
Because
and we're going to get to that in a second. And I think it's interesting you talk about it in terms of habit, because I've spoken to people about sort of their diet or their fitness or their learning or their training, and it all comes down to that decision. It starts very much with yourself. I just need to make a decision that this is going to be different or better from what it is today. And I think, like crash diets, if we remove something from our diet so quickly, we're going to crave it and yearn for it and get back to it as fast as we can. Which is why I don't do
Yes.
things like dry January or whatever it is, October, and all those sorts of fad diets. I
Right.
think are dangerous. And it sounds like
Right.
you kind of related it to a similar scenario with sleep. Yes, you can go to your doctors and get some drugs which will knock you out, or the CBTI therapy, but let's look closer to home and think how we can decide to do things different and
Yeah,
practice.
and to your point, when you do something drastic with change, so one of the things that is included in what I call the habit lock is, like, I'll tell a client, imagine like you're going to go through some changes in the next 48 hours just based on this conversation, and you'll probably get a win or two. And then there's the fact that the rest of it takes time. And I
Mm,
said, it's sort of like a medieval castle with like these two big guards at the front. Like if you try to go all out and try to get in, they're going to slice you down. Like you're done. It's not going to work out. But if you can scale yourself real small and sneak in real tiny, like, and over time start growing from the inside, you can pull the door down and knock those guys out. But you have to sneak into the castle. So, part of when I train people is to really start small,
mm,
that no matter what we're doing, it's going to be very small, because we kind of have to sneak past what I guess is the subconscious of some kind that's resistant to, drastic change. Like, just like you said, I remember in high school being like, I'm going to eat healthy, and went to the dining hall and I like made this big salad with no dressing on it. And like I'm a third of the way through it. And I was like, I can't do this.
yeah,
I can't ever do this.
because
You
the
know?
decision's too big. It's like, oh no, I can't do this. No, I need to
Yeah,
start.
there's definitely like this weird push and pull where I feel like neuroscientists, especially over the last 20 or 30 years, have been sharing in their books and in their publications, like, hey guys, guess what? Your brains aren't stuck. They can change. The problem with the message is that it makes it sound like Rob can be like, cool, I'll just change from this to that tomorrow. And it's like
that. Yeah.
like in a very few cases, yes. But for the most part, the quote unquote fact that neuroscience has proven that the brain can change doesn't change the fact that it can take some time.
Mm,
So when I see, and for all of your watchers and folks who tune in, if you see any of that stuff online, it says like 14 days to better sleep, 3 days and you'll be sleeping better. It's lies. They're going to try to sell you something. That's what they're doing.
I always respect people like
it
that
doesn't work that way.
who say that because I think, Nick, this is a society thing, it's a social media thing, whatever it is. It's a good marketing angle, and it sounds like get rich quick. Well, no one's going to get rich
Yes.
quick. Let's get rich
Yes.
slow. Let's get
Yes.
fit slow. Let's get healthier
Yes.
slow. Well, that's not
Yes.
sexy, and it's
No.
not attractive, but it's where the reality is. And I think if we can get beyond that, in all sectors, in all walks of life, let's get beyond the quick wins, and let's just decide. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Let's take our time.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah. I mean, I think the good news is that, like you said, you get to a point where you make that decision,
mm,
that kickoff point. And I've read some literature about this, that it's very good to like start a new thing that you want to try to have in your life around like official start times and whatnot, because it gives you a little extra oomph in it. So I often find people who just talk to me for an hour, I'll follow up with them later and be like, hey, did you end up doing that one thing I shared with you that is the 2 rules I give first time clients? And they're like totally thrilled. They're like, yeah, I wish someone had told me that 10 years ago. Like, it's great. This is what happens. This is what I do. And my life has been so much more enjoyable. So, sometimes it's just like 1 or 2 little things can like, woo, really go far. But I always try to rope it in to be like, there are other things that will take some time. But the cool thing about it, and the cool thing about the brain, is that eventually, just like these other aspects of you, it automates.
yeah.
So like on like this past Sunday was supposed to be like my day of rest. And my like routines and schedules are so habit now that I couldn't help but do some of the things that I would do during the week. And then I was doing things, and I was like, this is totally coming out of my brain's automatic
Yeah,
system. Like,
because
it's
you've
not
got
the
a habit.
hyper conscious me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's what a great framing. I think that is. Even sleep is a decision. It's a habit. And it's things you do and things you can, which we're going to touch on in a little bit. But I think, Nick, it's probably time to come to the burning question that we've teased a couple of times. How much sleep is enough?
Great question. So, up until about a little less than a year ago, there was an academic journal called Sleep. These are journals that no one reads, that professors hang their careers on. And this is a relatively new journal, so really no one's reading it. It's probably well over $100 to get like 4 issues a year or something. And so I was like, I've learned enough. I've had enough. I don't need more. And but like usually those companies will send you 1 or 2 more just to be like, don't. But Rob, don't you love it? I mean, wasn't it great? And I remember literally standing in my kitchen to my mom being like, why are they still sending me this stuff? But I would always check and thumb through to see, are there any studies with huge population sizes? Because
Mm.
those ones might have something interesting to say and might have actually figured something out. Well, it must have been like one of the last 3 articles in this journal, a study that says sample size was over 400,000 people. And I was like, oh, pause everything. We're going to read said study. Well, it was such a vigorous, international, very inclusive study. And once, I mean, I'd still read research if you had 70 people, but 400,000 people?
Mm.
Okay, what did you find out? Well, there's what they wanted to find out, which I'll share with you later. But one of the side sort of pieces that came out of all the analytics when they started doing all the data crunching was, oh, seems to be a minimum, and it is 4 hours. So if you're not getting 4 hours, you are definitely not hitting the minimum. And it turns out there's a maximum, and it's about 10 hours. And if you're this is crazy, Rob, because I found this out, not it took me a while to, like, even I kind of had to experience this myself to believe it, that there actually is there is something that's too much sleep. Now they couldn't say that these 2 variables caused one of the other, but there was some relationship with staying in bed after 8 hours going on 10 plus that was associated with depression.
Right.
Which I mean, it was like, what? So you're telling me, like, you really need to get your butt out of bed before it exceeds 10 hours, because you're opening yourself up to another demon, which, I mean, suicidal ideation for people with depression is like everyday life. Like, they want out so bad. And so, wow, like, there really is a cap. You don't want to be spending more than 10 hours in your bed. And I could see, and I did myself, thinking like, whoa, I'm like getting all these hours of sleep after years of not sleeping. This is awesome. But you might be exposing yourself to the possibility of being an easy target for depression.
Mm. Wow.
So those are the cutoffs. So I'd say probably the sweet spot, probably 7.5 to 8 hours.
And Nick, just on that, minimum 4, maximum 10. Like I track my sleep as probably many do, as accurate or not as it is on these smartwatch things. And it breaks my sleep down into deep sleep, REM sleep, light
Yep.
sleep, and awake. So of that 4 to 10 hours, how much of that should be deep sleep versus
Great.
REM? Do you know that?
Yeah. It's actually an issue I had when I started spending all this time consuming these books by these, sleep doctors and stuff. Almost every book, the author feels like they need to do what you just did, which is explain the phases of sleep. But again, I'm a coach, so I don't really give a crap if 3 of the phases don't really do anything. So as it turns out, you're really in it for the first 90 minutes to 2 hours, where you get the most amount of what you said, deep sleep. It's in the deep sleep phase that your brain recharges, that you cognitively get, like they talk about like liquid literally moving through the brain and taking out debris. This is where all of the restoration is happening. It's in the first 2 hours of sleep. The rest of it is mostly just your body lying there. People love to talk about dreams. And I mean, there's whole books about dreams, and you can do things with dreams, and you can lucid dream and all that stuff. But, having done this for so long at this point, I'm like, actually, I think dreams are just there to try to keep your body to stay asleep. They're like to entertain you, not to wake up. So your body really needs that. And this is funny. This is again where like, one of the things again that makes me a bit of a dark horse in the industry is that I put such an emphasis on the fact that it's personalized to the person. Like in physical fitness, there's a lot more standardization across client to client. If I make Rob, Susan, and Jeffrey all do 20 minutes on the cardiovascular running machine in 3 weeks, each of them should roughly hit this. That doesn't translate well into sleep. That it's really so personalized. So I'll tell you the story of this kid who I may never say these words to a person for the rest of my career. He's the one, he's 19 years old at the end of the call. He's an international video editor. He's very talented. And he was like, "Can I ask you a couple questions?" And I said, "Sure, man. Why? What's up?" And so then he explained to me, my clients are in the other part of the world. I can't remember where he was from. And so I work all night long. I go out and do chores for a few hours in the daylight. I come home and I sleep for 8 hours, and then I do the same thing again. And I don't think he said, "Am I okay?" But he was basically saying, like, "Is this okay?" And so I just like slowed it down and was like, okay, so first of all, just so you're informed, in the States anyways, we call that shift work. People who work, nurses working the night shift, or my man Fraser in Canada, the sleep tech working the night shift. I said, I don't mean to scare you. I just want to inform you and be honest. There is no research that suggests that that's good for you in any way, shape, or form. All of the research I have ever seen on it is that it's bad and it's not good and it deteriorates all sorts of things. That being said, let me just confirm, you then go do chores out in the sun? Yes. And let me just double confirm, you get 8 hours, like a solid 8 hours every day. He's like, yeah. And I was like, and you're 19? Yeah. I'm like, well, if you're getting 8 hours like that, I know you're getting into the deep sleep phase. And that's the most critically important. And now, and he's hitting that sweet spot between 7.5 and 8 hours. He's 19 years old. I told him, I think you're fine. Should you do this for more than 5 years at this point? No. You probably should start to transition to something that's more daytime driven. But for now, as long as you were honest with me, I think you're good. And I remember sending a message to my sleep tech colleague and telling him, I just told a shift worker that he's fine and he can do it for 3 to 5 more years. And that might be the first and last time I ever meet someone who says that to me, who's like, I'm a shift worker, but I sleep 8 hours perftly. Like that's pretty freaking rare.
So for those listening, Nick, that might be shift workers, I mean, what are some of the risks they expose? How can you manage that if your career is shift working? If you are a nurse or a doctor or drivers or whatever overnight, is it just unhealthy, or is there no sugarcoating it? Is it just an unhealthy lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to have a happy-go-lucky answer for you, Rob, but it's like there's nothing that suggests it's not as bad as we think it is. Like cognitive decline, like if you get tested on things, like you show like you're a drunk person.
Yeah.
That's how you test out. for the shift workers I know, they just try to get really good at all different aspects of sleep, so that it's baked in. That's really the best that you can do, other than switching jobs. But that's like one of those rare kind of situations where it's like there's no good answer unless you're this kid and you're 19 years old and you sleep 8 hours. Then you're good for a few years, but otherwise it's not great.
Yeah, but if you're mid-30s to mid-40s or 50s, then you're doing more harm than good.
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah, and I don't know what the answer is about that society wise. I don't know if those roles need to have some kind of rotation that's built in, where they're subbing out after 3 years, or something like that. Those are areas I definitely want to push, hopefully, in the long term. But yeah, there's really no good answer for someone other than 19 spring chicken that you'll be okay.
Well, listen, let's try and end this conversation on some positivity, because you said you've got 3 unusual sleep tactics that you want to leave the viewers and the listeners with. So I'd be keen to explore what they are. All
right.
And I'm keen to know how unusual they might be, because I'm all ears at this one.
Yeah, so Rob is telling you the truth, viewers. I literally put this together for Rob's tribe, for you guys. One is what I would call a powerful sleep device that you already have. The second one is going to be a strange timing shift that I call worry your spouse. And the third one is a mindset that an 11-year study sort of backs up and might surprise people. And I actually brought examples of what you can do to amp that up. So the first one is this powerful sleep device. And I call it a powerful sleep device because the average outcome of using it, Rob, I'm short on technological devices and products that can ensure this level of improvement as this can. And it is wearing socks when you sleep. You will fall asleep on average 10 minutes faster, and you will sleep on average 30 minutes longer. So, gentlemen, wear your socks to bed, because they're beating, I don't know, I won't name some of the devices, but $300 and up devices can't say to you, we can promise you an average of 30 more minutes of sleep and falling asleep 10 minutes or less.
Sleep with like your socks on.
Just leave your socks on.
Does that work for kids as well? Do you know that?
I don't. I know pediatric sleep coaches, but I leave that to them. I kind of deal with the adults. The busy professionals are my specialty.
Wow. Leave your socks. That's amazing.
So good news is you already have a weapon in your disposal. You just need to use it. And for some reason, it works. It was
I'm going to leave these on tonight and let you know how I sleep.
Yeah. There's not a night that goes by that I don't sleep with my socks on. That's I will tell you. Second one, I like calling it worry your spouse, which is, if you like to have a couple drinks that night, have them the second you get home. Crack open the refrigerator, grab the beers, and put down a couple. Your spouse or partner might be like, what are you doing, Rob? You just got home. We haven't even eaten dinner and you're drinking. Yes, get your drinking in as soon as you get home, because like shift work, none of the research on drinking close to bedtime is good. It fragments the heck out of the back end of your sleep. Often people will awaken in the second half of their sleep because of alcohol's influence. It's a real problem. I just had another friend of mine, longtime sleep challenging issues, and kind of like we were talking about earlier, you settle, nothing was working, and so she would drink wine and it would make her fall asleep. And so that worked for a while until the negative part of it started to catch up. And just the other day, I was even surprised to hear her say, like, oh, I stopped drinking wine because it was, can we swear on here? I'm like, I almost quoted her. She said, it's fucking wrecking my sleep. And so she had stopped drinking. So guys, if you do love to have a drink, let your spouse know it's going to be early on in the evening, and not so much close to bed. You're
Do you know
not doing
what, Nick?
yourself
It's
a favor.
like I can vouch for that, because if I go out with my friends or something to the pub and we have a few beers, nothing where I'm like drunk or out of control, just a few. Even though I think I've slept well, when I wake up and check my stress in the morning again through this smartwatch thing, my
Yeah,
stress is through the roof. Even though I think I've slept, my body battery's low and my sleep is my stress level has been ridiculously high.
interesting. And what is it saying? What is the measure that it's showing? Like, is
So
it
it
blood
measures.
pressure, or is it when you
Yeah, I
say
need to figure out how it's
when you
doing it.
say
I think it's through
stress?
like.
What is it?
So I think it's measuring it through sleep levels, your stillness while you're sleeping. So are you uncomfortable? Are you unsettled? I think it measures
Yep,
your heart rate variability.
yep,
And it's obviously it's measuring how unsettled you are, I think. So the
yeah,
variation between high and low heart levels, whether you're moving around a lot, whether you're
yeah.
breathing regular, so if your breaths per minute go up and down, that sort of thing.
I'd
Um,
imagine probably less deep sleep too.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So even though I feel like, oh, I went to bed at 10:30 and I didn't wake up till 6, it's a terrible night's sleep still. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
It's not a good long-term solution. But hey, if you hadn't slept for 3 days and you got a wine bottle,
Crack
this
that
sleep
bottle.
coach here says grab the bottle and go.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Number three there, Nick. Mindset, I think, was one you mentioned. Probably the most
yeah, this
important.
one, I don't know country wise where you'll fall here, but this one is like really important to me being from the States. Is there was an 11-year follow-up study on this, and what they found is that compassion, people with higher capacities of compassion and empathy, slept statistically significantly better than those with lower scores. And they tested 11 years later and found that the higher scores were still sleeping better than before. And so
Wow.
if you kind of want to know kind of how I work, once I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm gonna bring that to Rob's show. You know, that's fascinating. So I grabbed kind of a few things that you could do to improve what your empathy is. I actually read a book too, in case guys are like, I don't know how you get better at empathy.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so I'm like, how do I hack empathy? So then the second question was like, well, what is it? Well, there's a hormone called oxytocin. So then I went out and grabbed every article on oxytocin and how do you hack it? How do you amp that up? And I brought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 dotted bullets of things I could tell you, but I highlighted just a few because they were rather shocking. And this is the other thing I said, is that these are all proven options on how you can amp your oxytocin, which means you're going to amp your sleep quality as a result. The first one is a total shocker. It's social media use. But how you're using it, it specifically must be kind and be stress compliments. If you're just throwing out hate, then not so much. But if you're using social media and you're being a nice, empathetic, kind person, it actually improves oxytocin spiking, which now is going to help you sleep better. So for all the, I don't know if you get it, but here in the States, it's like social media will destroy you. It's like, actually, if you use it in a certain way, it can help you sleep better. The second one, which I'm sorry for folks who have like major issues with this, I was shocked. And you could never guess this. Shoot guns.
We might have a challenge with that here in the UK.
Yeah. Tell your friend you want to go to the gun range or whatever and shoot guns because it's been shown for some strange reason to boost oxytocin. I have no idea why. So for you hard ass guys who are tough and you want to shoot, good news. It's gonna
Well,
help
you
you
guys in the
sleep better.
States must be as empathetic as anything then. You must be the most empathic country in the world.
I will take that punch, Rob.
Oh dear. Move on
And
to the next one quick.
yeah, no, the last one, and I'll show you the book too, The last one is really easy. It's not a shocker. Is reading fiction. I've seen
Mm,
this in several studies. I think there's something about getting into the person's perspective, right? You're like reading their mindset, because the studies are very specific. They're like, nonfiction not going to help you with sleep. It could even stimulate you if you read it too close to bed. But nonfiction allows for this connection and a growth of empathy, which boosts the oxytocin, which, like I said, you're in good shape. So, one of the things that I do, in one of those things, like I said earlier, that might seem bold, which is like, I don't have any fear of a client that I can't handle, because in the 6-week sort of standard sleep upgrade program for busy professionals that I do, we just stack the odds. It's like the
mm,
inverse of what we talked about at the beginning of the call, of a guy going, oh shit, I'm not sleeping that well. I'm going to try these cooling sheets and a new mattress, and then goes, well, I guess that's it. The plans that I work on and devise is we stack. So we would pick 3 things out of this list of 10 and figure out where to insert them into that person's life. So when it's fully like a plan, I mean, it has to be flexible, but we develop a plan that is so loaded in your favor that so long as you stay alive and carry it out, whatever the villain of sleep is for you, it's going to fall.
mm,
You've just shifted the odds so much in your favor. So it's not just shoot guns, it's do these other 3 things too, and let's figure out where in the day you could do them. Let's figure out where it's the easiest, and let's have them happen every day except for Sunday or whatever it is.
mm,
So literally loading up in each area, and just to like kind of give you the fabric of sleep. And this might be helpful just for your listeners to evaluate themselves. If you want to understand sleep, then it's really only 3 parts. There's your mindset and the beliefs that you have about it. There's, like you were putting an emphasis on at the start of the call, there's the physical activities that you do and when you do them. And then there's the environment around you. Depending on you, your level in each of those, we'll call them dials, right? Rob needs to be at a 6 in one. He needs to be at an 8 in the other. And he's like one of those guys who will sleep through a storm. So his bedroom stuff doesn't matter as much. We never know until we test all 3 of them. But those are the fundamentals. And so what I work on is, one, we got to do an inventory and see where you're at with each of them. And number 2 is, how do we quickly start getting those dials amped up till finally you're at a point where you're sleeping. And to our point earlier in the conversation, habits eventually become habits. Like, you won't be able to help it anymore.
mm,
You will sleep and there won't be anything. And I've said this in another interview. Success for me, and success for doing anything that involves sleep coaching, is that someday you'll have no freaking memory of what we talked about, of what the hell anything has to do with what, and what shifts this or that for sleep. You might remember me for always wearing a black suit, but other than that, success is that you have largely forgotten all of this, and you've been sleeping for
mm.
10 years and you don't think about it anymore.
Fantastic summary, and thank you for making the takeaways so relevant. I think that's excellent. And just as we round up here, Nick, tell us about your book. I think have you got a copy there, or is there something?
Oh, no, this one was the book I read for your podcast on
Oh, excellent.
train your empathy. So if you guys out there with your tough veneers, there's books out there. That was a good one. In 2, one of the easiest things to do, if like, if you're watching and you're like, yeah, I want to do something, but I don't want to shoot guns and I don't want to use social media and I don't like reading books, it's just giving somebody credit.
Mm,
That literally is like one of the quote unquote advanced techniques for raising empathy. So, but to your question, my book is called Sleep Fitness, and it's the top 10 sleep facts that matter. and it's unique. There's no other sleep book that's ever come out, A, titled that, and B, that's designed that way. Most of them are like step 1, step 2, step 3, you learn the phases, which do what, I'm not sure, and so on and so forth. But I had a friend die from sleep apnea, insomnia, and depression, and before he died, I remember saying to myself, like, is there something that I could put together for him that he could read that would be short enough, understandable enough, and would literally make a dent and maybe save him? And he died before I could do it. And so that's one of those other little motivators in me that keeps me going. And so I literally, that's the premise of the book. I basically said, well, if God came down and said, like, hey, Nick, you did a great job in life. You're due to be coming with me in 2 weeks. Close up your shop, say your goodbyes. I said, what would be the 10 things out of 4 years of research, 2 years of sleep deprivation, and 17 nights without sleep? What would be the 10 things I'd leave my family, my friends, my colleagues, or my clients? And so that's what the book features. And then I unpack each of them in greater detail. So there's some real substance in there. And from early readers, I think this is a surprise, and maybe this is something that can motivate some of the men who are watching. And I wasn't expecting this at all, because I'm more concerned with what I call repairing broken sleep. Is that not only was it effective in repairing sleep, they built up just like you would in physical fitness. Like if you lift weights for the next couple months, you're going to be stronger in 2 months, man. And it's the same with sleep. You do it the right way, and in 2 months, your sleep will be stronger. So it's not only about, can I get enough energy to meet the expectations of working full time and coming home with the kids and then doing the night class at night. No, they're finding that the further they go, the more capacity they have to be as engaged as they were at work as they are when they get home. Whereas for the beginning, they were totally excited, Rob, that they could just go to work and have enough energy for work, and then they go home and be kind of toasted. So you live these things out in a way long enough, and you got yourself a nice capacity for energy that will surprise you. It will surprise you.
Wow, Nick, your story's fascinating. And where can people connect with you and find out about you as we wrap up here? Where can we see more about you? Because you're such a charismatic chap, and your story's fantastic. And let's tell people where we can connect.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the obvious place always is the website, which is up, fixing a couple bugs. So sleepfitnesscoach.com. You can find me there. I'm offering this kind of unheard of single session guarantee, which basically says, get on the call with me for 60 minutes or so, and if you don't leave with one new tactic and one new insight about your sleep, I'll cut you a check and send it to you for $25 for your time wasted. If we figure out that you do need subsequent help, then we can talk about that. But the session is really just focused on you in the moment and what's the most pressing thing, and can we figure out something to leave you with. So you can contact me that way. My LinkedIn is getting redone, but that's a great place to find me and find other things that I offer that might be of help to folks. There's some posts there, some interesting interviews with different people that people might enjoy.
Brilliant. Well, Nick, no one will be getting a check for $25 from this one, because it's been stacked full of ideas and tactics, and I won't be taking my socks off tonight, and I will be having a better night's sleep. So
and have a beer right when you get home.
Absolutely. Nick, thank you so much for taking time. Really appreciate it. And
thank you,
you
Rod.
take care. And sleep well, mate. Thank you.
Yep. All you too.